Welcome to Experiential Game Reviews. I'm your host, Syon Grey. Today, we'll be discussing Gauntlet Dark Legacy. Gauntlet Dark Legacy was developed and published by Midway Games. It was released across 5 different platforms from 2000 to 2002. This review covers the PlayStation 2 version specifically. The game is an action RPG by genre, although it's heavy on the action and light on role-playing game elements. The story is minimal and emphasis is not placed on the stat and item systems that are present. Unlike many other action RPGs, there are no equipable weapons and armor. Although despite the absence of this commonly used feature, there are still ways to progress your character in strength and ability. A number of limited use items are available from the shop which can increase a character's effectiveness in battle. Some of the items are good all the time, like triple shot or rapid fire, while some of the items are only situationally useful, like gas masks or anti-death ability. These items only last for a limited time, however, they stack, meaning that you can buy 9 triple shots and it will last 9 times as long. It's a great idea to take advantage of this while fighting one of the game's many world bosses. Each boss in the game can be refought for additional coins and experience. This is great for leveling up new characters since it increases their stats and gives you money to buy more stat boosting items from the shop. It's possible to get all 999 stats on a level 20 or so character if you have another higher level character to do this with. When multiple characters are loaded, the game uses the progress from the character who's farthest along in the game. This allows you to take lower level characters farther on in the game as long as you're playing multiplayer. This is one of the ways in which Gauntlet Dark Legacy gives freedom to the player, which is good. Unfortunately, because of the way that levels are unlocked, it's still necessary to go through the entire game in single player with these newer characters if you want to use them in other levels. Well, that doesn't seem like a big deal at all. I'll explain this all with some game footage. There are 8 different default character classes that all play differently, have different base stats, and have different abilities. In addition to this, there are 8 different secret character classes that can be unlocked, which are like alternate versions of the default classes. This creates a large desire to use different characters throughout the game. It's easy enough to get a character's stats high enough through bossing. The problem is there are other barriers that prevent you from using them to complete new levels. In order to unlock each world, it's necessary for a player to collect a number of crystals which are scattered throughout the game in previous worlds. Once a world is unlocked, each level must be beaten in succession until a player can access the world boss. On top of this, the area that contains all the worlds is separated into 2 wings which are further locked by doors requiring golden tokens. These are gained by defeating large monsters. With 2 players, it's possible to do this faster, but it still takes a lot of time for each character. It would have been extremely nice if game progress had been tied to player profile instead of individual characters. And this way you could still just make a new name to start over in the game. To get all 16 characters to the 9th world, a player would need to collect 960 golden fangs as well as 19,840 crystals. Because of this all, this game is a completionist nightmare, but being too long is usually not a bad thing for a game. And despite having minimal RPG elements, Gauntlet Dark Legacy is not just all hack and slash. There are lots of interesting and seemingly random things that can happen throughout the game that will take a player by surprise. And the level design is quite good and varied throughout the different worlds. The enemies change, as well as the environments and the music, and just the overall feel of the worlds is done pretty well. In addition to the standard ice and fire worlds, there's a plagued field, a forest, a desert, as well as others. It gets more inventive towards the end with worlds like the Dream World. Players of any other Gauntlet series games will recognize these enemy generators as a common theme throughout the game. Enemies will emerge from various gates throughout the levels until these gates are destroyed. Typically, a gate will generate 4 or 5 enemies that go around it and just wait. The gate will generate more enemies only if some of the enemies that it has already generated have been killed. Larger gates will produce larger monsters and will sometimes take multiple hits to destroy. If you damage a larger gate, it will become smaller and start producing smaller monsters. These change based on the theme of each world and level. In addition to smaller mobs, there are sometimes bigger monsters that a player will encounter through different levels. These are tougher than normal monsters, but usually are not very strong. Although the whole game in general is not very difficult as long as you're properly leveled and have full health. This is mostly because nothing in the game is really capable of dealing enough damage to threaten a character with 9,999 HP. You can usually just walk right over traps, or stand on fires, or explode barrels in your own face, and it really doesn't matter as long as you buy more meat at the end of the level. Despite the lack of challenge, the game is still really fun to play, especially in multiplayer. The real challenge behind Gauntlet Dark Legacy is thoroughly exploring every level. In order to access the 9th world and defeat the real final boss, players must collect all 12 runestones hidden throughout all of the worlds. The game does provide hints as to which levels contain runestones. Although it's relatively difficult to die, some of the battles can still get pretty intense. There is a block button, but it's usually more useful for preventing stagger and knockdown effects than it is for reducing damage. If the enemies knock you down, it takes longer to kill them. It also can be fun to go back and do some of the bosses and see how fast you can kill them with stacking items and higher stats and levels. Gauntlet Dark Legacy is a very stable game overall, however it is prone to some strange glitches and weird effects from time to time. As you can see here, the Chimera boss's AI routines cause it to not retaliate for this entire fight. There are some occasional issues with the camera as well, since it cannot be controlled by the player. As you can see here, the view of this gate is blocked by a wall, so I'm forced to guess as to where it's at when attacking. Slashing through enemies can sometimes get repetitive also, but the game gives you ways to clear large amounts of trash mobs if you don't want to spend the time to fight them. Gauntlet Dark Legacy is a great game when you just want to have fun and don't want to think a whole lot about what you're doing. It's also deep enough to warrant some serious play though, and in general, its strengths outweigh its weaknesses by quite a bit. It doesn't have enough content to keep a person entertained for months on end, but it's good to have on the shelf.